It happened too fast. One moment, the woman was laughing, soft and breathless, the kind of sound that doesn't belong this deep in the forest. The next, her head snapped sideways with a sickening crack, and the thing that had once looked like a dog stood over her, chest heaving. I didn't scream, didn't run. I just froze behind the trees, my hand clamped over my mouth, my breath catching sharp in my throat like fish hooks. The silence afterward was louder than the kill, like the forest was holding its breath too. The creature, a dog but wrong, tilted its head. Its fur was too dark, too slick. Not black, but a color that swallowed light. Its eyes didn't shine, they absorbed. No collar, no tags, just something ancient in a dog's skin, panting softly over a body that twitched once, then never again. The air stank of iron. Blood steamed from the woman's neck. Her fingers were still curled like she'd tried to grab something, a branch, a breath, maybe even the dog's matted fur. I couldn't move. I knew her. Not well, but enough to recognize the coat, the boots. Emily, from the diner off Route 9. She'd smiled at me yesterday when I ordered coffee. Now her mouth hung open in a silent scream. The dog turned suddenly, not toward her, toward me. Its head lowered, tail rigid, not wagging, aiming. I backed up slowly, crunching a twig. It didn't chase. It just sat down, and it waited, like it knew we weren't done yet, like I was next. I stumbled backward, blindly reaching for a tree, needing something solid, something real. My back hit rough bark, sharp enough to bite into my jacket, but I barely noticed. Because the dog, that thing, was still sitting there, watching. It didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared. It wasn't just that it saw me, it recognized me. The way a predator studies prey it's hunted before. Not curious, familiar. My heart thudded against, my ribs like it was trying to escape without me. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a wolf, a feral dog, something sick. But wolves don't wait. They don't sit still after they kill. They don't stare like they're waiting for you to speak. My voice finally returned, raw, barely a whisper. What are you? Its head tilted, almost like it understood the question. Then, as if it had grown bored, it stood, walked over Emily's body, and disappeared into the woods. No rush, no panic, like it had made its point. And just like that, I was alone again, except I wasn't. I stayed hidden for what felt like hours, until the sun dipped low and the trees stretched long shadows across the forest floor. But I knew it was still close, somewhere beyond the trees, waiting. I crept toward Emily's body. I needed to be sure. But when I got there, she was gone. Not a drop of blood, not a scrap of clothing, just the indentation in the moss where she had fallen. And something else. A paw print. Far too big for any dog. Pressed deep into the earth. And next to it, another print. A bare human foot. The human footprint was fresh. Damp earth curled around its edges, toes spread like someone had stepped down slowly, deliberately. It was right beside the paw print, almost touching. Two impressions, two bodies. But only one thing I'd seen. Unless there hadn't just been one. The woods had gone utterly still. No bird song, no insects. Even the breeze had died. Just the distant groan of trees settling into themselves like something old waking up. I crouched low and stared at the prints. The foot was bare. No tread, no sock line. And it was small, slender. A woman's. Emily. But I'd seen her die. I had heard her neck snap. So who left this? I stood and scanned the trees, heart hammering against my ribs. Nothing moved. Not the branches, not the bushes, but the feeling was back. Being watched, the heat of unseen eyes brushing the back of my neck like breath. I turned in a slow circle. Still nothing. And then I heard it. Breathing. Close. Low. Wet. I spun and saw nothing. But it was there. I could feel it. like sound pressing into skin. My instincts screamed to run, but my legs locked. Something was just past the edge of understanding, as if the forest refused to show me what I wasn't ready to see. And then, from somewhere deeper in the woods, a bark rang out. Not angry, not playful, something in between, like a warning. I backed away from the footprints, heart rattling. I needed to get out. Back to my truck, back to town, to people, to light. But the forest had already closed in. And behind me, a second bark came, closer. It echoed through the trees again, low, sharp, guttural, a bark, almost. But something was wrong with it. Too long, too wet, too shaped, like someone was mimicking a dog's bark with human lungs. I turned and ran. Branches clawed at my face, thorns tore at my arms, my boots hammered against the ground, crushing dead leaves. And brittle roots, heart pounding louder than the wind in my ears. But the barks kept coming, now layered. One, then another, then more. Too many. From all directions, like they were hurting me. No, that wasn't right. They were guiding me. I broke into a clearing I didn't recognize, though I'd hiked this forest for years. It was circular. Perfect. Trees surrounding me in an unbroken ring. No trail, no sky. Just mist and the soft, smothered scent of rotting bark. And in the center, a leash. It lay curled on the moss like a snake. Old leather cracked and blackened with age. The collar attached was huge, rusted metal, the tag worn smooth. I knelt, breath shaking, and picked it up. As soon as I touched it, the air grew heavier. The woods groaned like something breathed in. The tag was blank, but the inside of the collar was carved. A single word. Stay. Behind me, a twig snapped. I turned fast. Too fast, and tripped, fell flat. And from the ground level view, I saw the trees weren't just trees. There were faces in the bark, stretched, mouths open, silent, watching, waiting. Then the barking stopped. Everything stopped, and a voice spoke, low, male, right behind me. You saw her die, didn't you? I scrambled to my feet and spun around, heart hammering. There was a man standing just beyond the trees, but he wasn't there a second ago. He stood barefoot, shirtless, his skin smeared with dirt and sap. His eyes didn't blink. They just stayed locked on mine, too wide, too clear. His lips were cracked like they hadn't formed words in years. But he'd spoken. You saw her die, didn't you? My throat felt too dry to answer, but somehow I managed. Who are you? His mouth twitched, like the question confused him. Then he smiled. Not kind, not cruel, just knowing. You saw the dog, he said, and now it knows you. He took a step forward. I stepped back. Did it speak yet? My stomach turned. What the hell are you talking about? He didn't move, didn't blink. His body was motionless, but his eyes were alive with something ancient. It doesn't always speak, he said, more to himself now, but it remembers everyone who watches. He looked down at the leash in my hand and flinched, like it burned. You shouldn't have touched that. The wind shifted. The man's eyes darted to the side. Then he stepped back into the woods without another word, like he was melting into the trees. Within seconds, he was gone. Not a footstep, not a rustle, like he'd never been there. I stood alone in the clearing, the leash heavy in my hand, the word "stay" pressed into my palm like it belonged there. A howl rose in the distance, not a bark, not human, somewhere in between. It was coming, and I finally understood. I wasn't just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was part of something I hadn't chosen, something that had already begun. The leash burned in my grip now, not with heat, but weight, like memory. The metal collar creaked softly, as if it remembered being fastened around something that didn't like being owned. Above me, the trees swayed, but there was no wind, not a single breeze, just the deep, slow rhythm of branches breathing. The howl from before was closer now, not just one voice, several, twisting together into something dissonant, canine but wrong, too intelligent, too old. I dropped the leash and backed away. But the second it hit the ground, something stirred behind me. Fast, low to the ground, four-legged. I spun and caught a glimpse, just a shape. Black, slick, eyes like two holes in space. It vanished between trees before I could scream. Another one flashed behind it, and another. I wasn't alone. I ran. This time, they followed. I didn't hear them so much as feel them. Not pause. Thoughts, breathing behind mine, keeping pace. They weren't chasing to kill. They were hurting again. I crashed through the forest, heart hammering, lungs burning, and suddenly, I burst into another clearing. This one wasn't empty. There was a cabin, old, sagging. Its porch half collapsed, windows boarded up, door crooked on its hinges. The smell hit me immediately, blood, rot, and wet fur. I hesitated. Then the growl came, low and gurgling, from the woods behind me. I ran to the door and threw myself inside. Darkness swallowed me. I slammed the door shut. Silence. And then, from the shadows, a voice whispered, "You brought the leash, didn't you? The voice didn't belong to the forest. It was human. Barely. The room was black, the air thick and rancid, like something had died in here and never been found. My eyes adjusted slowly. Cobwebs laced across broken furniture, animal bones, claw marks on the walls, the rot of old blood soaked into the floor. And in the corner, movement. A shape unfurled from shadow. A man, if you could still call him that. Skin gray with dirt and time. One eye milk white, the other sharp as glass. His beard was a tangle of knots, and when he smiled, his teeth were broken to nubs. "I smelled it on you," he said. His voice was low, wet, like it bubbled from somewhere too deep. I stepped back. "What is it?" I asked. "The dog. What the hell is it?" He didn't answer at first, just stared at me, breathing slow and deliberate, like each breath was measured against something that might break. Then he said, "It's not a dog." I swallowed hard. "Then what?" He tilted his head. "It's what comes when we bury things that should stay moving." I didn't understand, but something in me already did. A cold thought, half-formed, crawling behind my ribs like roots looking for a way in. He pointed to the wall. Carved into the wood with shaking hands were dozens of names. Dozens. Each one ending the same way. Chained, ran, watched. And at the bottom, Emily. Took. My knees nearly buckled. He stood suddenly, faster than I expected, taller than he seemed. And with a dry rasp, he said, "You brought its leash back. That means it's yours now." I stared at him, throat dry. "What do you mean it's mine?" He didn't answer. Instead, he knelt by the wall and dragged his finger through the dust, tracing one of the carved names. Martin. Fed it, then looked up at me with those uneven eyes. "It doesn't forget its leash," he said. "And it doesn't follow just anyone." The room swayed around me, my pulse throbbed in my ears. This wasn't real. Couldn't be. But somewhere deep inside, something in me whispered, "It is." "Why Emily?" I asked. "Why kill her?" His face twitched. "She touched it," he said. "Tried to bury it." He leaned in closer, and I saw the scar under his jaw. Deep, ragged, old, like something had tried to rip his throat out and almost succeeded. It follows the ones who carry guilt, people who can't let go. It smells what you hide, and it feeds on it. He gestured toward the boarded window. "That's why you're here, isn't it? You didn't just see her die. You've seen worse. You've done worse. His words slammed into me like ice water. He was right. I couldn't say how. But he was. The leash, the forest, the dog. It wasn't random. It was drawn to something. To me. From outside, a growl rose up, deep, resonant, like it came from beneath the floor of the earth. We both turned toward the door. Dust fell from the ceiling. "It's close," the man said. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You brought it back. You either chain it again." He turned to me slowly, eyes gleaming. "Or it wears you." Outside, the growl deepened, like a mountain shifted, dragging roots and soil in its wake. The cabin groaned in reply. The man knelt again, placing his hands flat on the floorboards like he was listening through them. "It won't kill you yet," he whispered. "Not while it's still choosing." Choosing what? He looked up slowly. His face had changed. His fear peeled away like bark from dead wood. "Hosts." My breath caught. "You said I could chain it again. How?" He stared at the floor. Didn't answer. So I grabbed his shirt and yanked him up, his body light as twigs. "Tell me." He didn't flinch, just smiled. "You already know. You felt it the second you touched that leash. You saw what it did to Emily. You think it was just killing?" He leaned in so close I could feel his breath. Hot, sour, animal. It was testing, feeding, learning. Outside, the growl became a howl, long and wrong, cracking like dry bone. The walls pulsed, and then a knock at the door, 3 soft raps. Like a polite guest asking to be let in. We froze. The man turned to me, mouth trembling now. The madness faded. "You opened the door, kid," he whispered. "But that doesn't mean it walks through yours." The doorknob twisted. I backed away. The man didn't move. Instead, he dropped to his knees, head bowed, and whispered one final thing. "The leash isn't to hold it. It's to lead it." Then the door opened, and there, backlit by the night, stood the dog. Except, it was wearing a man's face. It stepped over the threshold like it belonged there. The frame didn't groan beneath its weight. The floor didn't creak. It moved like a shadow, smooth and soundless, except for the breath. God, the breath. Wheezing, wet, rhythmic, like lungs that hadn't belonged to a living thing in years. Its body was canine, long legs, thick shoulders, slick black fur like oil-stained moss, but its face was human. Or close. The eyes were too wide, the skin too tight. It looked like someone had pulled a face off a corpse and draped it over a dog's skull. It stared straight at me with a smile that had no business being on something that growled. I froze. Behind me, the old man stayed kneeling, whispering nonsense. Words in no language I understood, like prayer and warning stitched together. The dog thing turned toward him, sniffed the air, then it laughed. Not a bark, not a growl, a laugh. Like someone learning how to speak by listening to screaming. It stepped closer to the man. He didn't move. I should have run, should have bolted through the back window and never looked back. But I couldn't. Because when it turned again, its face had changed. It wasn't a stranger anymore. It was Emily. Her eyes, her nose, her soft, crooked smile. The blood still fresh on her cheek. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. "Why?" I choked. The thing smiled wider. "You watched," it said. Its voice was 2 things. Hers, and something buried beneath it, dry and deep as dirt. "So now you lead." Then it dropped the leash at my feet, and sat, like it was waiting for my command. The leash curled at my boots, still warm, not from heat, but from something else. like it remembered being gripped, being used. The creature sat in silence, still wearing Emily's face. Its jaw twitched slightly, stretching her smile too far, like the skin was beginning to slide loose. A thick line of drool ran down one side of her chin. No, its chin. I looked at the man behind me. He hadn't moved, still on his knees, eyes closed, mumbling. He wasn't praying anymore. He was waiting too. The air buzzed with pressure, like the moment before lightning hits a tree. I knelt, hand trembling, and reached for the leash. The second my fingers touched it, everything changed. Not the room, not the dog, me. I saw it, visions crashing into my skull, violent and raw. Forests at night, faces caught mid-screen, the crack of necks, the pulse of old roots. A woman running barefoot, a child buried in snow, blood steaming on frost. Then silence, and something watching it all, not with eyes, with intent. I pulled my hand back, gasping. The dog tilted its head, still smiling, still waiting. "What do you want from me?" I rasped. It stood, stepped toward me, lowered its head, and spoke again. Emily's voice, too calm, too familiar. Not want, need. Guide me. The leash twitched like it was alive, wrapping itself around my wrist, and before I could scream, the cabin door slammed shut on its own, plunging us into darkness. And from behind me, the old man's voice finally broke through. "If you lead it, it will take you places no one walks back from." The cabin went dark. No wind, no creak, just absence, as if the air had folded in on itself. The dog's breath was the only sound, soft and steady beside me, tethered to my wrist like we'd always been connected. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't dare. Behind me, the old man whispered again. "You think you're Ho, holding the leash, but that thing's never been leashed. Not really." The dog's head turned toward him. No growl, just acknowledgement. Then it looked back at me, still with her face, still smiling. "You'll take it hunting," the man said. "That's what it wants. That's what it's always wanted." "I'm not helping it kill anyone," I snapped. He laughed, quiet, dry. "You think you've got a choice?" I tried to pull the leash off. It didn't budge. It pulsed once, gently, like a heartbeat, and the dog stepped forward, dragging me with it. I stumbled after, helpless. The door opened by itself. Outside, the forest was no longer the same. The trees leaned in, their branches knotted together above like a ceiling. The ground was soft and wet beneath my boots. The sky was gone. The dog sniffed the air and turned east. Then it moved, and I followed. Not by choice, not by fear, by compulsion. Something inside me shifted, aligning. It wasn't just hunting, it was searching. Not for prey, for something familiar. And with every step I took, the woods felt more like a memory. One I didn't know I had. And far in the distance, someone screamed. Sharp, sudden, recognizable. My name. "Liam!" It came again, clear, cracked, unmistakable. My name. Not shouted in panic, but called like a mother rousing a sleeping child. I froze. The dog didn't. It kept walking, leash taut, dragging me forward like my hesitation didn't matter. The trees thinned slightly, just enough for the moon to peek through, and I saw it. A figure ahead, standing motionless between two trees. Far enough away I couldn't see her face, but I knew that posture, that silhouette, that hair pulled into a knot at the nape of her neck. Claire. The name slid through my chest like a knife unsheathing. My sister. Dead for 5 years. Dead because of me. "Claire," I whispered, stumbling forward. The dog stopped. It didn't bark. It didn't growl. But the leash tightened like a warning, or maybe a test. The figure didn't move, didn't speak again, just stood there, watching. The last time I saw Claire was in these woods, a night hike gone wrong, a fall, a body we never recovered. I told the cops I didn't see what happened, but I had. I saw everything. The branches breaking, the blood on the rocks, her hand reaching for mine, and me pulling away. Cowardice dressed as fear. I never told anyone. Now she was back, or something that looked like her. And the dog. It was staring straight at her. Waiting. The leash loosened, as if asking me to choose. I stepped forward, and Claire turned her head just enough for me to see one side of her face. Torn, split, stitched back together with twine and teeth. She smiled and whispered, "Finally found me, didn't you?" My knees buckled. I reached out to steady myself, hand sinking into wet moss. She was still standing there, still smiling, but it wasn't a human smile. It was stretched too wide, too deliberate, like someone had practiced it in a mirror but never quite got the muscles right. The dog took a step forward, its leash slack. It wasn't growling. It was watching me. Watching what I would do. Claire's eyes never left mine. One was hers, brown and wide, full of the same fire she'd always had. The other was glassy, hollow, dead. "You didn't come back for me," she said softly. The forest swallowed her voice, but it still struck like a bullet. "You climbed out and left me there." "No," I whispered, throat tight. "You fell. I couldn't." Her head tilted. "You didn't even scream." That broke something in me. The memories came rushing back, no longer distant. Her hand in mine, the weight of her slipping, my fingers loosening, the silence after her body struck the rocks below, and the way I ran. Not to get help, but away from what I'd done, from her. The dog let out a soft, guttural sound. Approval, encouragement. I couldn't tell. Claire stepped forward. Her smile faded. Now she just looked sad. "It follows guilt," she said. "You know that, don't you?" Her voice trembled, not like a ghost, but like a sister, like a wound that never closed. "You brought it here," she whispered. "You fed it." The leash in my hand tightened suddenly. The dog growled, low, warning. Claire looked down at it, then back at me. "You don't lead it." She raised a hand, blackened, bark-thick fingers curled like claws. "You answer to it." Claire's outstretched hand hung in the air, shaking. Her voice had changed, no longer soft, no longer mournful. Now it commanded. "Tell it." The dog stepped closer to her, shoulders low, muzzle curled back just enough to show its teeth, but not at her, at me. The leash trembled. Something unseen passed between them, an understanding, an ancient bond, like it wasn't just hers or mine, it was ours. A shared consequence. I took a breath, but it caught in my chest. My voice failed. Shame locked my jaw, but I knew what it wanted. It wanted the truth. I turned toward the dog. My hand tightened around the leash. My throat burned. "I let her fall," I whispered. The trees didn't move. The wind didn't stir. Even the dog stood still. But Claire smiled, wide and broken. I kept going. She slipped. I caught her for a second, but I swallowed hard. I let go. I panicked. I ran. I told everyone I didn't see it. The woods exhaled, long and slow. Claire took another step forward. Her eyes shimmered with something between grief and fury. "And you forgot me," Tears blurred my vision. I couldn't stop them now. "No," I said. "I tried. I swear. I buried it. I buried you." The dog let out a low, rattling sound. Not a growl this time. A purr. Satisfied. The leash in my hand warmed, almost lovingly. Claire nodded slowly. "Now it's yours," she said. Her form shimmered, flickered, and then she crumbled. Bark, leaves, and dirt falling into a pile at the dog's feet. I dropped to my knees. The dog stepped beside me, rested its head on my shoulder, and for the first time I understood. It doesn't hunt the guilty. It makes them confess. The forest opened again, not with light, with path. Trees leaned aside as if granting passage, and the dog, my dog now, or maybe just with me, walked forward, leash trailing from my wrist like a whisper of guilt. The ground squelched beneath my boots. Beneath it I felt movement, something old, something listening. We walked for miles or minutes. I lost time. My thoughts kept circling Claire, how she looked, what she'd said, what she'd become. The dog hadn't spoken since. It didn't need to. It had seen me now, inside and out. The worst of me was no longer mine alone. It paused at the edge of another clearing. I followed, hesitating just before stepping through. There were 3 people inside. A man, a woman, a teenage boy. Campers. A fire crackled between them. They were laughing, marshmallows roasting, music faint from a phone speaker. Normal, alive, innocent. The dog sat beside me, watched, waited. The leash didn't tighten. The growl never came. Instead, I heard its voice in my head. Not words, not commands. Just a question. Who among them lies? My heart froze. The boy leaned back, tossing a wrapper into the fire. The woman sipped from a thermos, eyes darting nervously toward the trees. The man scratched his arm, repetitively, like something crawled beneath his skin. I didn't want to answer, didn't want to guess wrong, but I knew the pattern now. The dog doesn't hunt at random. It hunts truth that's been buried, and it was asking me to choose. Not to kill, to reveal. I stepped forward into the light of the fire. The campers looked up, surprised, confused. The woman squinted at me, then her face paled. She recognized me. The woman stood slowly. The firelight caught her face just right, and I remembered. Not from the forest, from before, from town. Her name was April. She used to work at the clinic. Admin side, quiet, eyes always a little too wide. A person who looked like she was running from something even when standing still. Her lips parted, voice barely a breath. "Liam?" The other 2 looked between us, confused. The man stepped forward protectively. The boy just watched. The dog stayed hidden in the tree line, but I knew it was watching, waiting. "What are you doing out here?" she asked. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I wasn't the one with something to confess. She was. The moment she saw the leash dangling from my wrist, her hands trembled. Not fear of the dog, fear of recognition. The man asked, "You 2 know each other?" April hesitated. Too long. Then, "We worked together. Years ago." A lie. I stepped closer. "You remember Claire?" I asked. "Claire? My sister?" The air shifted. The fire popped. April flinched like the name burned her. "What does she have to do with this?" The boy looked between us now, uneasy. The man's arms were crossed. "You knew her," I said. "You knew what happened." April's eyes shimmered. Tears or sweat, I wasn't sure. "I was supposed to report it," she whispered. "But the parents, they paid to keep it quiet. Said it was an accident. I signed the form." The leash pulsed. The dog stepped forward into the firelight. The boy screamed. April dropped to her knees, sobbing. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for her to." But it was too late. The forest had heard her confession, and the dog was already walking toward her. April knelt, arms wrapped around herself, shivering, not from cold, but from memory. The boy backed away, face pale, heart pounding loud enough I could feel it. The man grabbed a branch from the fire, waving it toward the dog. Useless. The dog didn't flinch, didn't even blink. It stalked slowly, each step deliberate like a ritual, its eyes locked on April, not as prey, as offering. April sobbed, voice cracked and frantic. "I was told to keep quiet. I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to." The dog paused beside her. I held my breath. The leash slackened, and my wrist felt numb, like the decision had already been made. April looked up at me, desperate. "You don't understand. I thought she slipped. I didn't know, until later. I thought..." She stopped, swallowed. "I thought you pushed her." The fire hissed. The forest leaned in. The dog opened its mouth, not to growl, to speak, but not in words, in sound. A low, wet moan, like the earth crying through lungs buried centuries deep. April froze. Her pupils dilated. She didn't scream. She just slumped forward, eyes wide, lips trembling. Then she whispered, "I remember." The moment the words left her, the dog brushed past me and vanished. Gone. No attack. No blood. Just silence. April collapsed beside the fire, breathing, alive, but changed. The man rushed to her. The boy didn't move. I turned and looked into the trees. The leash still hung from my wrist. And from somewhere deep in the woods, another voice called out, a different name. "Harris!" The man froze, slowly turned toward me. His face had gone ghost white. "What did you just say?" "Harris." I said it again, without thinking, without knowing why, like the forest had whispered it through my teeth. The man stared at me, his hand slowly pulling away from April. "You don't know that name," he said. More like a command than a statement, but I did. Somewhere inside, I did. The dog was gone from sight, but not gone. Its presence pressed in like humidity, thick and waiting, watching. April curled into herself, rocking gently, not from fear, from release. The boy took a step back from the fire. Harris, if that was his name, stood frozen. His fingers twitched at his side like they wanted to curl into fists but couldn't decide whether to fight or flee. I stepped toward him. "The forest said it," I told him. Same way it said Emily, same way it said Claire, same way it said April. He swallowed hard. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't know what I did." "But it does," I said, lifting the leash. "It knows all of us." Something moved in the trees behind him. Not fast, not loud, just inevitable. The boy said, "Dad?" And Harris, finally, broke. He turned toward the trees and screamed, "It wasn't supposed to happen like that!" Silence. Then, "He wasn't supposed to wake up." April looked up sharply, pain flashing across her face. "What did you say?" The dog stepped out again. Its body was darker now, slick with something that shimmered like oil. It stopped a few feet from Harris. The man dropped to his knees. "He was hurting her," he whispered. I stopped him. I had to. No one breathed. Then the dog sat and said, "Then why did you bury him in pieces?" Harris didn't answer. He couldn't. His mouth moved, but no words came. Just dry, useless breath like air over old bones. The dog leaned forward, tongue lolling lazily. It wasn't hungry. It was savoring. April's face twisted as if something invisible had struck her.
What
are you talking about? Harris shook his head slowly. The boy, silent until now, stepped forward. Dad. And that's when I saw it. The way Harris looked at the boy. Not fear, not guilt. Grief. The boy stared at him, eyes watering. "Uncle Ray?" April gasped. The pieces slid into place like a blade between ribs. She backed away from Harris like he was suddenly something else. "You told me he left. That he moved away." Harris didn't look up. The leash twitched in my hand. The dog stood. The fire flickered blue for a moment. Cold. Wrong. Harris finally whispered, "I found out what he was doing to the boy. I warned him. Then I came back, and I found him in the tent. With him." His voice cracked. "So I took a hammer." The trees groaned around us, bending inward. I buried him where no one would find the pieces. He looked at the dog. Tears streamed down his cheeks. "I'm not sorry." The dog stepped forward. The boy's scream broke the spell. "No, don't hurt him!" But the dog didn't lunge. It licked Harris's cheek. A long, slow pass of its tongue, like a priest anointing the condemned, and then it turned, walked back to me, and sat. The leash fell slack. Behind me, the boy sobbed. April didn't move. And Harris? Harris never blinked again. The dog sat beside me again, silent. It didn't need praise. It had fed, not on blood, but on truth. The fire hissed behind us. The campers were broken now, shaken from the inside. April knelt, holding the boy, who trembled like he'd just seen the sky fall. Harris stared forward, glass-eyed and unmoving, like something had been scooped out of him and left nothing behind. And in the hush that followed, the wind picked up. Not normal wind, a wind that carried names. Dozens, hundreds, soft, overlapping voices. Some begging, some confessing, some just whispering their own names over and over, as if to keep from forgetting who they were. I turned slowly in place. The forest had changed again. What had once been trails and roots and underbrush was now something else. Corridors almost. Paths that bent in unnatural ways. Trees that curled into arches. Bark that pulsed like skin. The dog stood, looked up at me. The leash grew tight. Then it turned and pulled, not toward the campers, not back toward the cabin, but into that dark new corridor of forest. A path shaped by memory, by guilt, by names. I followed, because I had no choice. Not anymore. And as I stepped beneath the arching limbs, I saw something carved into the bark of a tree, fresh. Liam, lead it. My breath hitched. This forest didn't just punish, it remembered. Every step, every lie, every silence. The dog walked ahead, tail low, posture calm, but alert. It was hunting again. And though I didn't know who it hunted now, I knew the forest had already whispered the next name. And soon, I would too. The forest had teeth now. Not literal ones, but I felt them. Behind bark, under roots, in the way branches curled too tight, too sharp. Like everything around me was holding back hunger. The dog led, silent as ever. I followed. The leash didn't tug this time. It guided like a memory, gentle, assured. And then I heard it. A name. Nathan. Whispered like wind through pine needles. My breath caught. I knew that name. Years ago. High school. a friend I hadn't spoken to in a decade. We'd gone camping once. Just once. The dog moved faster now. It could smell the path, the guilt, the lie. I remembered the campsite, the rain, the drinking, the way Nathan had stumbled off into the woods around midnight, muttering about finding a dry place to sleep. We never saw him again. They searched for days. I told the rangers I never saw where he went, but that wasn't the truth. Not all of it. The dog stopped ahead. We were standing in a clearing I hadn't seen in years, but my body remembered it. The tilt of the hill, the ring of stones, the moss-covered stump I sat on while Nathan yelled into the darkness, drunk and angry. "You let him go," the dog said in my head. I fell to my knees. "No," I murmured. He wanted space. He was going to come back." You heard him fall. The sound returned like thunder. A shout, a crack, and then nothing. I never told anyone. I never even looked. The dog tilted its head. A branch snapped behind us. I turned and saw someone walking toward the clearing. Wet, dirty, mouth sewn shut, but unmistakably. Nathan. Nathan stepped into the clearing, slow and stiff, like his joints had forgotten how to bend. Mud clung to his clothes, moss threaded through his sleeves. His eyes were bloodshot, wide, unblinking. But it was the mouth that made my stomach drop. Stitched shut. Coarse black twine pulled tight across cracked, pale lips. Like the forest hadn't just buried him, it had punished him for trying to speak. I stood, took one shaky step forward. "Nathan?" He stopped a few feet away, his head twitching to one side, like a dog hearing a far-off whistle. His breathing came shallow, quick. He raised one trembling hand and pointed, not at the dog, at me. The stitches strained. Blood seeped at the corners of his lips as he tried to speak. I shook my head, tears brimming. "I was scared. I thought you were fine. I didn't know you fell that far." But I did. The scream he gave as he slipped still echoed in my ears at night, and I'd stood there, frozen, then turned and walked back to the fire. I told them you just wandered off, that maybe you went home early. The stitches split. A wet sound escaped Nathan's mouth, half gasp, half gurgle. The dog stepped beside me, watching him closely, then looked up at me and said, "He waited for you," until the cold took his voice. Nathan collapsed to his knees. His eyes locked on mine, and I whispered, "I'm sorry." The forest rustled, not with wind, with relief. Nathan exhaled once, shuddered, and then dissolved, his body crumbling into soil, twine, and bones, swallowed by the moss. Only silence remained, but the leash in my hand tightened again. The dog turned its head west. Another name was waiting. We walked for hours, or maybe minutes. The forest twisted time the way it twisted paths. Nothing stayed straight. Trees rearranged when I blinked. Shadows lengthened too fast. The dog didn't tire. It never did. It led with purpose. Each paw fall as steady as a metronome counting down something I didn't want to face. I knew what came next. Not because the dog told me, because I felt it. Like a toothache deep in the soul. A pain I'd ignored for too long. Then the air changed, colder, thinner, like it was harder to breathe, not because of altitude, but because of memory. The clearing appeared again, different but familiar. A house stood there, collapsed, rotting, skeletal, but I'd recognize it anywhere. My childhood home. The dog sat just before the porch, eyes on me, leash taut. My legs nearly buckled. This was the name I buried the deepest, and the forest had unearthed it. I stepped forward. The wooden steps crumbled under my weight. The door was open, hinges long gone. Inside, the air was thick with mold, with the ghosts of shouted words and broken dishes. I could almost hear them. My father's voice, booming, cold. "You're just like her." I climbed the stairs. Every step felt like glass underfoot. At the end of the hall, his room, I paused outside. The dog didn't follow. It stood back, watching, because this was mine. My silence, my guilt. I pushed the door open, and there he was, sitting on the edge of the bed, same as that last night. Only now his skin sagged like soaked paper, and his eyes were hollow, still holding the belt in his hands, the one he never got to use that final time, because I took it and wrapped it around his throat. He didn't move when I stepped inside, just sat there, his eyes gray and sunken, his hands still curled around the cracked leather belt like he didn't know he was dead. Or maybe he did, and was waiting for this moment. I took another step. The floor groaned. He lifted his head and smiled. Not kindly, like he'd never stopped being in control, even after all these years. Even after I killed him. "You cried when you did it," he rasped. His voice was brittle, full of dust and ash. Weak, just like your mother. I clenched my fists. Every part of me wanted to turn, to run, but the dog stood in the hall, unmoving, watching me like a mirror with teeth, waiting for the confession. I stepped fully into the room. The air was thick with rot, with memory. "You deserved worse," I said. He stood now, and yet you hid. Let them think I ran. Let your mother take the blame. The weight of that sentence hit me like a hammer, because it was true. She'd been arrested 2 days later, after the cops found blood, broken drywall, and no sign of him. She'd never said a word in her defense, and I never stepped forward, not once. I shook. Then I spoke. "I killed you. I watched the life leave your eyes, and I felt relief." The dog stepped into the room. My father didn't flinch, but his body began to split. Not from the outside, from within. Like the truth itself was breaking him apart. He opened his mouth to scream, but only black smoke poured out. And then, he crumbled. Gone. The room went still. The leash in my hand went cold, and the dog said softly, "Now we finish it." I stood in the ruins of my father's room, breath shaking, sweat cold on my back. The dog sat at the doorway, still and silent, like a sentinel, like a judge. And then, as if the house itself exhaled, the walls groaned, splintered, collapsed inward. But I didn't run. I stepped through. Falling plaster and choking dust until I was outside again, beneath a sky that had turned the color of bone. The trees rustled, though no wind blew. The forest was waking up, but not for me, for itself. The dog circled around me once, then it looked west, where the trees turned black and brittle, where roots knotted like twisted veins. It moved forward. I followed, because I knew. This wasn't about me anymore. I had given my truths, bled them into the bark, confessed them to the dirt. But the forest had one more secret it needed to speak, and I was its mouth. The path narrowed. The sky disappeared. The roots pulsed. And then, an opening. A hollowed glade, wide and wrong, like something dug it from the earth's ribs and left it to fester. In the center, a mound, low, quiet, and breathing. I approached slowly and saw what lay half buried in moss and vine. A woman, eyes wide open, skin cracked like dry earth, mouth sewn shut. But she wasn't dead. Her eyes tracked me, trembled, and her lips moved beneath the thread, fighting to speak. The dog lay beside her, ears back, chest low, and I understood. This was what it had always hunted toward. The final silence. Not a lie I told, but one I had inherited. a secret passed down through blood, and now it wanted me to dig it up. The moss peeled away from her skin like old cloth, pale flesh beneath, dirt embedded in every crack like the forest had tried to claim her, but failed. Her chest rose and fell, barely. She was alive, but not free. The threads across her mouth were darker than Nathan's, thicker, woven with something that gleamed. Metal? Bone? I couldn't tell. They pulsed faintly, as if the thread itself was alive. The dog paced in a slow circle around her, ears down, tail low. Reverent, not predator. Servant. I stepped closer. Her eyes locked on mine, and I saw it. Recognition. Not of my face, but of my blood. My stomach twisted. "Who are you?" I whispered. But I already knew. I reached down and brushed dirt from her collarbone, revealing a faded scar, a crescent moon-shaped birthmark, the same one I had, the same one Claire had. She was family, but older, much older. Eyes filled with centuries of silence. And when the wind moved, I heard her name, Elira. The dog stopped pacing, and the threads over her mouth began to tighten, drawing blood. She shook, violently, as if trying to force the words out anyway. And I felt it in my bones. This woman had started it. The dog, the forest, the punishment. It hadn't been born here. It had been summoned. Bound, fed through generations, by silence, by guilt, by acts too dark to name, passed down until it reached me. The last link in the chain, the final confessor, and the one with the choice to end it. The dog stared at me, eyes glowing faintly, waiting. Would I unbind her, or bury the secret deeper? The forest leaned in, holding its breath. I knelt beside her. Elira, my ancestor, my blood, lay trembling, her lips quivering beneath thread that pulsed with every heartbeat like it wanted to strangle the truth in her throat. I reached out. My fingers hovered above the twisted cords sealing her mouth the moment I touched them. Pain lanced through my palm, sharp and ancient. Visions erupted behind my eyes. A younger Elira, kneeling in the woods, hands soaked in blood, a ritual carved into bark. A wolf burned alive in a circle of ash. And then, her voice, not with words, but through memory. I bound the beast with guilt. I fed it with secrets. To protect the ones I loved, I made a curse that hunts the broken and punishes the liars. I reeled back. The dog whined, low, guttural, not in pain, in protest. It didn't want her free, because she was its maker, its master, or worse, its origin. I looked at Elira again. Her eyes pleaded, not for life, for release, to speak. And I realized this wasn't just about punishing guilt. It was about preserving it. Elira had made something that never forgave, and now it had turned on everyone, including her. The leash tightened in my hand, a choice. Keep the truth buried and remain the forest's vessel, or pull the thread. Let her speak. Let it end. I reached for the thread again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I gripped the root-like cords and pulled. They screamed. She screamed. The forest screamed. And then, her mouth opened. She gasped once and whispered, "It wasn't meant to last this long." The moment Elira spoke, the ground beneath us cracked. Not just the dirt, the very bones of the forest trembled. Trees bent as if in pain. The sky split open in a streak of red lightning that didn't flash. It bled. The dog stumbled back, whimpering. The leash in my hand snapped, not broken, unneeded. Because the thing Elira had bound was no longer a servant, it was free. The clearing went dark, not with night, but with absence. Like light had been swallowed, like time had forgotten us. Elira sat upright now, breathing hard, eyes wide. "I thought it would end with me," she said, "that the curse would bury itself." The dog was no longer a dog. Its form twisted, shoulders too long, fur falling off in wet clumps, jaws splitting wider than they should. Its eyes, once amber, were now glowing white. Empty, like it had shed its purpose. Elira reached for me, clutching my arm. It was never meant to feed this long. The lies gave it shape. But the guilt. She looked at me, sorrow deep in every crack of her face. "You gave it strength." I turned to the thing. It wasn't growling. It was waiting. For what? A master? A sacrifice? Or maybe just a witness? Because what stood before me now wasn't just a beast. It was every secret never confessed. Every scream swallowed. Every body never found. And it was hungry. Not for flesh, but for release. The forest had kept it chained with silence. Now I had to ask, what happens when the truth breaks the chain? And what does the truth want? The creature, no longer dog, no longer bound, towered before me. Its body rippled like smoke trapped in flesh, legs crooked, back arched unnaturally, tail twitching like a wire ready to snap. The white eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I didn't feel hunted. I felt seen. Elira crawled backward, trembling. "It needs an end," she whispered, but not silence this time. My voice came out hoarse. "Then what?" The air shifted. The trees leaned in again, this time not in menace, but as witnesses. Elira pointed at my chest. You're the last in the bloodline, the last secret." I stepped back. No, I gave it everything. Claire, Nathan, my father. I confessed. You confessed your guilt, but not the origin. The creature growled low and long. The forest seemed to nod. And I remembered, the day after Claire died. The moment I found my father digging something in the woods. Not Claire's body. A journal, old, black leather, filled with spells, and one page torn clean out. I hadn't realized then what it was. I burned it, without thinking, without telling anyone. And that was the moment it all began. The forest's change. The first howl at night. The first missing hiker. The binding hadn't weakened over time. I had broken it. I dropped to my knees. "It's my fault." Elira's eyes welled with tears. The beast stepped forward, closer than it ever had. It lowered its head and waited. I knew what it wanted now. Not blood, not more names. It wanted the last word spoken, the one I had buried beneath all the others. I opened my mouth and said, "I unleashed you." The instant the words left my mouth, "I unleashed you." The forest exhaled. Not wind, not air, but something older. A release, like the closing of a centuries-old wound. The creature stopped moving. Its head dipped lower. The skin on its back shuddered, rippling like water over bone. Then, it collapsed. Not violently, not dead, just undone. Its limbs folded in on themselves. Its snout shortened, fur drifting away like ashes caught in a breath. One by one, its pieces faded, bone to bark, shadow to root, howl to silence, until nothing remained but a patch of scorched ground at my feet, and the leash, limp and burnt, resting in my open palm. The forest stood still. Elira lay back in the grass, breathing shallow. Her eyes met mine. "It's over?" I asked. She didn't nod, didn't speak. She just closed her eyes, and for the first time in what felt like centuries, rested. I looked around the glade. The trees no longer leaned. The pressure in the air lifted. Even the birds, silent for so long, began to chirp again, cautious and confused. The dog was gone. No monster, no judge, just me, and a final, awful quiet. Because once the horror ends, you're left with what you let happen and what it cost. I stood. The forest didn't stop me. No more visions. No more names. But as I turned to leave, I saw something in the bark of the nearest tree, freshly carved, still bleeding sap. The forest remembers, and beneath it, but who remembers the forest? I didn't understand it then, but I would. Soon. I walked. For hours, maybe days. The forest looked different now, less warped, less hungry, but still old, still watching. It no longer pressed against me like a wall of teeth, but it remembered. The trees didn't whisper names anymore, but they listened. Every footfall felt like I was stepping over graves I didn't know the names of, maybe no one ever had. When I emerged back onto the trail, the real trail, marked and dusty, the kind hikers followed with phones and bottled water, it felt surreal. I hadn't seen it in weeks. Or had it been longer? The ranger station sat at the bottom of the hill, just where I left it. Lights off. Quiet. I reached the porch and tried the door. It opened with a groan. Inside, nothing had changed. Maps, coffee mug, radio crackling static. Like the forest had spit me out, and everything was pretending nothing happened. But as I stepped to the desk, I noticed something carved into the wood that hadn't been there before. Fresh, still raw. It feeds on what you bury. I stared, not just at the words, at the feeling they left behind, because the monster was gone, the binding broken, but seeds had been sown. By me, by Elira, by the others who came before. Truth had ended the beast. But truth also planted things. Roots, ideas, warnings. And as I stood there trying to catch my breath, I heard something outside. A bark. Not cruel, not monstrous. Just familiar. I stepped to the window and saw a dog. Black fur, amber eyes, sitting at the tree line, watching, waiting. For the next lie, I didn't move. Neither did the dog. It sat perfectly still at the tree line, the place where forest met man-made trail. Like it wasn't sure which world it belonged to anymore. Maybe neither, maybe both. Its fur didn't ripple with shadow like the creature I'd known. Its eyes didn't glow. But those eyes, they were too familiar, too knowing. It tilted its head. I stepped outside. The evening air was cool. The trees didn't lean. No names whispered on the wind. But something deep in my chest twisted anyway, because I knew. The beast had ended, but the idea of it had not. I crouched a few feet from the dog. It didn't flinch, didn't blink. It just watched me the way a mirror might, reflecting something I hadn't seen in myself until it was too late. I whispered, "You're not it, are you?" It blinked, slow and deliberate. And something in my mind, some thread woven since childhood, tugged. The dog rose, took one step forward, stopped, then looked over its shoulder, back toward the forest, like it wanted me to follow. No leash, no command, just invitation. But this wasn't about confession anymore. It was about continuation. Elira had bound it. I had unbound it. And now something else waited in the roots. New hunger, new silence, a new shape. The dog turned and walked into the trees. Not monstrous, not glowing, just quiet, patient, because the forest doesn't need fangs to kill. Sometimes it just needs a witness, and I was still watching. I didn't follow the dog, not then. But I thought about it, every day. The forest called in quiet ways now. A shadow at the corner of my room, scratches on the ranger station's back door that I never heard happen. A soft bark, far off, just as I closed my eyes at night. The curse was broken, but curses don't end, they transform. I returned to work, filed reports, answered radios, walked trails and daily. Karirin pretended I didn't see the new footprints in the soil. Others noticed things too. A woman who camped alone said she heard voices in the trees. A teenager ran screaming from a hiking path, sobbing that something had spoken his dead dog's name. The same name appeared, carved faintly into bark a few miles from the ranger station. Lucky. No one knew what it meant. I did, because the forest wasn't feeding anymore. It was remembering. And memory is hungrier than anything with teeth. Sometimes I still hear Elira's voice in my dreams. You ended the monster, but you left the door open. And the worst part? I still feel the leash. Not in my hand, but inside me. In my bones. Like a thread that never really snapped. Just went quiet. The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it binds you to the very thing you tried to kill. And now, I understand the dog. It wasn't hunting because it wanted to. It was trying to warn me, trying to contain what can't be buried. Because secrets always find light, and something is growing in the roots of this place. Something new. I returned to the glade one last time. Not because I was summoned, because I couldn't stay away. The place where Elira had lain was now bare earth, overgrown with soft green moss and clusters of pale white mushrooms that looked like teeth if you stared too long. The trees no longer bent inward. They stood upright, still, like sentinels. But beneath the stillness, I felt it. Something new. Not evil, not angry, but aware. The dog was waiting, sitting exactly where the ashes had fallen, where the leash had burned away. Its fur was darker now. Its eyes no longer glowed, but they watched, deep and silent. I sat across from it. No fear, only understanding. You're not a monster, I said. You're a memory. It tilted its head, and for the first time, I realized it wasn't watching me anymore. It was watching the forest behind me. Something moved there, slow, careful. I turned. A child stood at the edge of the glade, mud on her legs, leaves in her hair, eyes wide, filled with questions she didn't yet know how to ask. She held a leash in her hand, old leather, frayed. I looked back at the dog. It stood, walked past me, toward her. No growl, no threat, just a reunion. She reached out, looped the leash gently around its neck. The dog leaned into her touch, and for the first time I understood. The forest doesn't punish, it remembers, and when memory becomes too heavy for one soul to carry, it finds the next one. The girl looked at me. Will it follow me now? I nodded. No, you'll follow it. And she did, into the trees, where stories never end, only change shape.